Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's national polling lead slightly shrinking while he continues to hold an edge over the president in several swing states. Eric Trump, executive vice president of the Trump Organization, joins the rundown to discuss the 2020 race, how it compares to the 2016 election, and why he says he does not trust the polls. And Michigan Congressman Dan Kildee says he believes the president has lost the trust of Americans when it comes to dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. The Democrat weighs in on the ongoing health crisis, the upcoming presidential debates, and the importance of Michigan in the presidential election. Plus commentary by author, lawyer, and Orthodox Rabbi Sam Bregman. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Greg Gutfeld.
I'm Liz Klayman, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, September 18th, 2020. I'm Dave Anthony. The president and Joe Biden will both campaign in the same battleground state, where polls have the Democrat in the lead. Not a concern to Eric Trump.
They got it wrong in 2016. I think they're going to get it wrong again. In fact, I see more enthusiasm in 2020 than I did in 2016, to tell you the truth.
I'm Lisa Brady. Democrats have seen this movie before, too, and some of them aren't willing to trust the polls either.
I don't think anyone can take anything for granted. It's going to be close, and we're going to have to finish the race.
And I'm Rabbi Sam Bregman. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Early voting starts today in a state that has gone Democrat blue in every presidential election dating back to 1976. But this year, the Trump campaign thinks it has a shot at winning Minnesota, so the president will hold a rally tonight in Bemidji.
The left has launched a vicious and violent assault on law enforcement,
reiterating his law and order message dating back to protests turned riots in Minneapolis after George Floyd's death in an encounter with police.
Whether it is the mob on the street or the cancel culture in the boardroom, the goal is the same: to silence dissent, to scare you out of speaking the truth.
The president at a Constitution Day event at the National Archives Museum on Thursday.
Patriotic moms and dads are going to demand that their children are no longer fed hateful lies about this country.
Joe Biden will campaign in Duluth, Minnesota today as the Democratic nominee releases 2 new ads in battleground states.
In addition to bringing back the jobs that have been lost this year, my plan will help create at least 5 million new, good-paying jobs in manufacturing and innovation.
His second commercial's message is very different.
Yeah, I voted for Trump in 2016, and I'll be the first to tell you I made a mistake.
He's a farmer in Pennsylvania.
You know, President Trump, he's not responsible for this virus. Nobody was going to be able to stop that, but he was totally negligent on how he informed the people. I mean, the guy gets the blame for what's happening.
Now, the Trump family is out campaigning, trying to counter that message.
I have to say, pretty much everywhere we're going, the energy is like beyond good. I mean, every time we have a rally, every time we have an event, 400, 500, 600 people show up.
We caught up with Eric Trump in New Hampshire.
The enthusiasm out there, for Make America Great, for my father, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see.
No, a lot of those states your father won in 2016, but in the polls, he has been shown to be behind Joe Biden, from Arizona to New Hampshire to Florida and Michigan and a lot of those places. Does that bother you, worry you at all?
You know, it's we always watch the polls, and I always watch polls. I also read the backup to a lot of the polls, and it's interesting. We faced the same thing in 2016, where I'd be in Pennsylvania. I mean, I'll just give you a great example, and you'd see 200 Trump signs. You'd be driving through Pittsburgh or some area. You'd see 200 Trump signs, and then you'd get home and you'd be watching TV, and some pollster or somebody on one of the big channels would be telling you that you're down by 10 points there, and you're sitting there saying, this doesn't make sense, all right? I just, spoke in front of thousands and thousands of people. You had people, literally waving the American flag. You had people in MAGA hats. You had babies dressed up in babies for Trump, and we're going to lose. I mean, we'd be driving down the road. We'd come across a barn, literally, Trump 2016. Now I'm seeing a Trump 2020. Or, a family literally spent a week out there painting the thing. That's how much enthusiasm there was. And we're seeing none of that for Biden. We saw none of that for Hillary. And, yet they would always tell us that we were behind in the polls. And, they got it wrong in 2016. I think they're going to get it wrong again. In fact, I see more enthusiasm in 2020 than I did in 2016, to tell you the truth. And it's unbelievable, some of the stuff that we're seeing out here.
In the Fox poll that came out the other day, Joe Biden's favorable rating and your father's favorable rating are inverse. Joe Biden has 54% favorable. Your father has 46% favorable. So for those who don't view your dad favorably, what do you try to tell them? How do you try to change their mind?
You know how much I love Fox, and you know how much I love some of the hosts on Fox. But for whatever reason, the Fox polls have been some of the worst and some of the least accurate polls. And I just have to say it. And you guys are an incredible network, but your polling has always been beyond bad. And, what do I say? I don't know. I think a lot of Republicans aren't polls. I think a lot of Republicans don't pick up their phone. I think a lot of Republicans, sometimes are fresh and frankly lie. I can't tell you how many people, I've spoken to. Yeah, I got polled for the first time. Well, who did you say you were voting for? I said I was voting for Biden because I don't want them to know who I'm actually voting for, and I didn't care to tell them. And, what I can tell you is the enthusiasm out there. Just look at all the signs. I mean, forget about these nonsense polls that are typically done by people that have, some motivation one way or the other. Look at these signs. Look at the boat parades. Look at, these, you have 15,000 people on an average weekend, right, in Clearwater, Florida, that are going out there flying the American flag and flying the Trump 2020 flag. I mean, look at these, Rolling Thunder, these motorcycle rides, and then look at the crowds that we're all pulling in these states. My wife, myself, Don, Ivanka, when we go to these states. I mean, it's the love out there is unbelievable. It's tremendous, and those are the only polls I need to see. And and then look at other kind of quantifiable metrics. I mean, last month, my father's campaign website had 16 million people visited it, right? Whereas Biden's website had 3 million people visited, right? I mean, we could go on and on with those statistics like that. I see some of the Fox polls with a sample set of 400 people, and I normally question the results because it's, for some reason they've never gotten it right, and I think they're getting it wrong again right now.
The one thing in the poll that you probably would like is that more people view your father as a better steward for the economy than they think Joe Biden. How much, when you go out, how much is your message about the economy?
Well, it's a massive part of my message because I don't think there's ever been a better economic president than my father. I mean, I implore anybody listening right now, open your 401ks, open your IRAs, open any pension plan you might have, and look how much it's up. I mean, Dave, in the 8 years of Obama and Biden, the Dow Jones went up by 4,000 points. In the 3.5 years of my father, the Dow Jones has gone up by 12,000 points. So if I love hearing these comments from him. Oh, we created a great economy. My father's created a great economy, and that's what happens when you cut taxes and you cut regulation and you become a great cheerleader for this nation. And you look at what Biden wants to do. Biden wants to increase taxes by $4 trillion. You know what that'll do to our markets? I mean, our markets will literally tank, if he ever gets in. I mean, could you imagine how devastating that'd be for the United States? $4 trillion a year in extra taxes for this nation. I mean, that would literally bankrupt so many companies, bankrupt so many people. I mean, it would just be a disaster. And
but they're trying to get rid of the tax cut that they say that wasn't necessary, that helped people who are at the high-end income and helped companies. Businesses that don't pay their fair share is what their argument is.
Yeah, well, 82% of people would have their taxes go up. So effectively, that's everybody in the country that pays taxes. 82% of people would have their taxes go up under, Biden's tax cuts. And the reason you had 3.6% unemployment in this country, 3.5% unemployment in this country, is because cut small business taxes, and they could hire more people and they could invest in their companies as opposed to being choked off by taxes. And obviously we did something right. I mean, during most of the Obama administration, you had substantially higher unemployment than you do during this period of COVID. I mean, if you could possibly believe that. And when you see 10.4 million jobs return to an economy in 90 days and, the markets are skyrocketing again, I mean, there's tremendous confidence in this country, and that should make every American incredibly proud.
During the second term for President Obama, on average, there were more jobs per month created than in the first 3 years of your father's administration. This year's crazy, of course, with the virus. So when you say that the Obama administration didn't do very much, but in job creation, they did lead your dad on average in their 4 years versus 3.
I don't know about that. Obama sent every single job out of our country. Look at the factories that closed. Look at the industries that were decimated under Obama. Look, I would highly contest that number, but you didn't see wage growth under Obama. I mean, you had stagnation under Obama. You had 0.9% GDP growth under Obama. I mean, wages weren't going up at all. In fact, wages hadn't gone up in 10 years in this country. There was total stagnation of wages. So, just to say he was a great jobs president is just not the case. He had the slowest recovery coming out of a recession in the history of our nation. That's a fact, Dave. I mean, it's a fact. They crippled industries all across the country. I was in Minnesota talking to loggers. The Obama administration absolutely crippled that industry as well. I could go on and on and on, but
your dad's critics. Eric, your dad's critics also say that he ignores science, climate change with wildfires and the coronavirus, that he's constantly battling doctors on the coronavirus. What's your response when you hear that?
No, I think my father realizes that there's, competing forces at play, and both of them have to be taken into account. The virus was very serious, and that's why he shut down the country, and he did it while Joe Biden was calling him xenophobic for closing down travel to China. At the same time, we have the largest economy in the world by far, and you can't shut down our entire economy for the rest of eternity, where people don't have jobs and businesses are closed and people can't provide for their families. There are competing forces, and both of them have to be taken into account. Biden came out the other day and said, yes, I would re-shut down the economy. I would re-shut down our country. That's a scary proposition. I mean, you've got families out there that depend on, everybody that depend on their jobs to feed their families, to provide education to their children, that need livelihoods. You have to open up restaurants. You have to open up, shopping centers. You have to open up our country once again, gyms and this and that. These people provide for, this is the United States of America. We can't be closed for the rest of eternity. And, so my father is a big believer in science, but he's also a pragmatist, right? He believes that you have to have a viable economy in this country, and we can't just leave America closed in perpetuity.
All right, you go out campaigning for your dad, 2016, here again in 2020. You ever want to do this for yourself, run for office someday?
Honestly, it's I really mean this. It's a brutal. It's not a business, but it's just a brutal profession. It's tough. It's nasty. The people in Washington D.C. The vast majority of the people aren't good people. The vast majority of politicians. There's so many horrible people in the profession. Look at some.
So it's okay being out for your dad, but you don't want to do this for yourself so much.
Yeah, I don't know. I would certainly, if my son ever came to me or my daughter and said, "Listen, I really want to run for office," I'd probably discourage them from doing it. It's just it's nasty. I always thought real estate was the toughest industry in the world. I always said it was, their babies compared to some of these politicians, the lies that they make up and the way they try and go after people and the way they try and take people down. Just look at what they did to Justice Kavanaugh. They made up lies. They tried to destroy the man. Look at these phony dossiers. Look at the way they weaponize the, legal system in this country. Look what, they weaponize the DOJ and the FBI. And it's a horribly nasty business. At the same time, I'm so proud of what my father's been able to accomplish. He's done more in 3.5 years than I think any president in history. And, the sacrifices he's made for the country, for a country that we love, and, red, white, and blue, which is what we love, is tremendous. So, I don't know. I believe he's done a phenomenal job, but it's certainly tough. Politics is rough in this country, especially on the level that we play at, and it discourages a lot of great people from going into it based on the antics of so many involved.
Well, I'm sure we'll see a lot more on the campaign trail. Eric Trump, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Rabbi Sam Bregman with your Fox News commentary coming up.
While the president and his campaign praise his record and defend his coronavirus response, Democrats are assailing his leadership and his character. Monstrous is the word used by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer after the president's reference this week to death rates in blue states.
If you close your eyes and pretend that half of the country doesn't exist, maybe some might think you didn't do such a spectacularly awful job.
The race does appear to be tightening, though, and while the Biden campaign makes more trips to battleground states, his supporters are also taking notice.
I'm very cautious about overreading or overinterpreting the polls.
Representative Dan Kildee is a four-term Democratic congressman from Michigan.
I mean, we've been through this once before in 2016 where, the president never really had a lead until Election Day and won Michigan by 10,704 votes. So, these polls, they're a snapshot of who we predict will vote on any given day, and we don't really know yet who will show up. So I think they're accurate in terms of the people they're polling, but the real variable that we look for is what's the level of enthusiasm for Trump supporters, what's the level of enthusiasm for Biden supporters. That's the biggest variable. So, I will say we're going to work to the very end. Obviously, I support Vice President Biden, and I don't think anyone can take anything for granted. It's going to be close, and we're going to have to finish the race.
Michigan's one of the states where there were protests over lockdowns. So I'm wondering, is Joe Biden out of touch a little with Michigan voters, working class voters, when he criticizes the president's push to reopen?
Not at all. Not at all. The fact that people have disagreements over the measures that the governor took shouldn't be read as a lack of public support, but just a diversity of opinion. Most people that I speak with, and you can look at the polling, most people in Michigan support the measures that the governor took. So, I don't think he's out of sync. I think he's actually quite aligned with the people that I know who are very concerned about coronavirus, want to make sure that the proper measures are being taken, and have seen the approvals for this very same governor that the president has been criticizing. The approval rating for that governor is far above the approval rating for the president in Michigan. So I think Joe's message is not only correct from a health standpoint, but it has the additional value of being aligned with the thinking of the people of Michigan, or at least the majority of them.
He does face criticism from time to time that, for not really saying exactly what he would do differently. He gets accused of saying things that actually have already been done, or even stealing the president's ideas for something like the, push to buy American, Made in America, that initiative. But even on the pandemic, he gets accused of where are the specifics. You're not really saying what you would have done differently. Does that worry you at all? Is that something that concerns you heading into the final weeks of the campaign?
No, because I don't accept the premise. I've spoken to Joe. I've been in meetings where Joe is actually quite clear about how he would operationalize the Defense Production Act, for example, to make sure that we have adequate PPE. So, actually at the outset of your question, I thought you might have been referring to President Trump, because very often he says things but doesn't follow through on them, or says something that simply, turns out not to be the case. And I get it. People who are opposed to Joe Biden are going to find every way and every reason to find something he said and find fault with it in this very difficult time. I guess the same is true for opponents of President Trump. But when we step back from all of this, the people I represent and the majority of people in my state don't feel that the president has handled this very well at all, and would prefer someone who would just simply level with them.
Mr. Biden certainly does spend a lot of time attacking the president, though, as opposed to really talking about policy proposals. Does that hurt, down ballot Democratic candidates? Because I know some have started breaking with his campaign's more cautious approach and have actually started going back to knocking on doors, wearing masks, but knocking on doors, kind of trying to get back out there and campaign a little more aggressively. So is it, do voters really know what he stands for aside from being completely and totally vehemently opposed to the president?
Well, again, I think they do. I mean, when Joe was in Michigan a little over a week ago, it was to lay out a very specific set of policies. And you know, I guess this is all sort of in the eyes of the beholder, I suppose, because the people that I talk to and the people back home see it pretty differently. When, like, for example, you mentioned bringing jobs back and, you know, the Buy American initiative that Vice President Biden laid out, it was a very specific set of tax incentives and proposals that I think make sense. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, the tax writing committee, and what he was saying makes perfect sense. So it's more than a slogan, it's policy. So and on that point, you know, I think the vice president is laying out a vision. On this issue of the tactics of the campaign, I think there's a real conversation going on right now. Personally, I don't believe that the campaign tactics that the president has engaged in are helpful or safe. There were, you know, over 5,000 people packed into Freeland, Michigan, almost none of them wearing masks. That's probably not a good idea. But to be fair, I think there are ways to get out there, to knock on doors in a safe fashion, wearing masks, to be careful, that we're going to have to explore, because the cautious approach, I think, from a public health standpoint is justifiable, but maybe there are some things that can be done that are safe, that also allow the kind of careful direct voter contact that campaigns traditionally engage in. So we're looking at that.
Many times voters' elections do come down to the economy as the overriding issue. You know, is their household better off than it was 4 years ago? I mean, why shouldn't voters think that the president could deliver on building a great economy again? And at the same time, I want to circle back to, because you mentioned Biden's tax plan. He always says no one with income of $400,000 or less is going to see an increase in their federal taxes. But there is some concern that it would have a broader impact, that people, you know, beyond that income range might take a hit from his proposals, something like, you know, $4 trillion worth of proposals. So how do you, you know, balance out those arguments to voters?
Well, I think we just have to look at the record. I mean, we have a tax bill that was signed by President Trump that granted huge benefits to the people at the top. It obviously was disproportionate in the benefit that accrued, 83% of the benefits going to the top 1%. I think what I've heard from Vice President Biden is not that we just throw it in reverse and go back to the previous tax code, but try to find some balance so that we are able to manage the fiscal condition of the country and of the federal government, but that it's fair. I mean, there are just far too many people, far too many corporations in this country that pay zero, nothing in taxes. And that's not right. That's just not right. Just plainly wrong. That has to be addressed, and that's one of the things, you know, I'm on the tax writing committee, so it's a subject that I'm somewhat familiar with. I think that is something that most Americans reject.
I have to sneak in one last question about the upcoming first debate, because that's going to be interesting, seeing the two of them going one-on-one together. The former vice president does take heat for making gaffes. And just recently, he and running mate Kamala Harris both made reference to the Harris-Biden administration instead of the Biden-Harris administration. Are you worried about those kinds of things at all? Do you hear any concern coming from your constituents about that?
No. Honestly, I think that's a little bit like people complaining about Barack Obama wearing a tan suit. If we really are going to have a debate, let's be fair about this. If we really are going to sort of stack up the gaffes that Joe Biden or anybody else may have made, when everything you're saying is being recorded, you're going to, say some things that might not come out right. If this comes down to a race that is determined by the gaffes that everybody wants to make, pay attention to, that Vice President Biden might have done, and this is just part of who he is, against the litany of tweets, of statements, of misstatements, of outright, demonization of people, of name calling, of childish rants by this president. I'm willing to have that be the measure of the two candidates and let it go at that.
Worried at all about the debate?
No, I think it's the way I see it, it's going to be an opportunity for people to look at both of these candidates, listen to what they have to say, and make a judgment as to who they want to have lead us going forward out of this coronavirus pandemic and into the future.
Michigan Congressman Dan Kildee, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's the Perino and Steyerwalt I'll Tell You What podcast. Dana Perino of The Five and Fox News political editor Chris Steyerwalt dissect the ins and outs of national politics. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
We're still more than a month away from Halloween, but fans of the holiday are already thinking about their costumes, the decorations, and if trick-or-treating will be a possibility this year with COVID-19. But one man in Cincinnati has come up with a way to hand out candy in a socially distanced fashion. Andrew Beatty usually goes all out with the decor for Halloween, and since the coronavirus pandemic has brought with it the need for social distancing, he and his daughter have invented a candy chute for just that reason.
Thought this would be a good year with everything going on right now in the world to put something together.
He says they were able to use things around the house and put it together in about 20 minutes. The chute is a 6-foot-long by 4-inch wide cardboard shipping tube, painted orange and decorated with black tape. He fixed it to the railing of his front steps, and he's even wrapped it with strands of Halloween-themed lights. Trick-or-treaters put their bucket under the bottom of the tube and...
So I'll be having gloves or tongs and pulling out fresh candy from a freshly opened bag and dropping it down the tube. The little ones will hold their trick-or-treat buckets or bags right here, and it'll fall into the bucket or bag.
He posted his idea on Facebook, and so far it's been shared more than 80,000 times. Beatty also points out the touch-free candy chute may also make things easier for those with mobility issues, as it doesn't require navigating stairs.
Every year I dress up like Michael Myers or something of that nature, and you got a lot of little kids that are afraid to walk up to someone like that, and then you've got people with strollers, people with wheelchairs, things of that nature. There's already some struggles when you got something like this to navigate, so it was already an idea that was I think waiting to happen, and this just was kind of the catalyst to kick it off.
Special thanks to Fox 19 Now's Brittany Harry, who reported the story. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Rabbi Sam Bregman. What's on your mind?
For Jews around the world, this weekend begins the annual high holiday season, beginning with the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah, followed by Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, 10 days later. Against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic, for many Jews, this will be a most unusual season of observance. This will be the first time in their lives they're unable to attend the high holiday synagogue service or gather with family or friends. Just as the restrictions on public worship were difficult for Christians worldwide this past Easter, so too, this holiday season will pose unique pandemic-related challenges for Jewish people. Of course, the peculiarities involved with synagogue worship this year aside, the messages of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur remain timeless ones for people of all faiths. These holidays are deeply affiliated with the idea of personal renewal and the ability for a human being to chart a fresh course in life. In particular, this fresh course is in the area of deeds of kindness and selflessness towards our fellow man. What is the source for this? The Torah explains that since Rosh Hashanah corresponds to the 6th day of creation in the Bible, the day that God created Adam and Eve, it thus becomes an annual inflection point to contemplate the lives we've been living in our public and private lives, and to pivot as necessary. It's axiomatic. There's basically two types of people in this world, those that are self-centered and those that are other-centered. While, of course, every person needs to take care of himself, there is also a unique, soulful pleasure that comes from bettering the lives of others around us and multiplying our own involvement in acts of kindness. Although that sounds quaint to some people and it plays an attenuated, muted role in our society, every person can avail himself of the sweetness that accompanies a life focused on goodness and kindness. It only takes a willingness to do so, because there is more to life than our own self-aggrandizement. Our behavior and choices really do have consequences in this world. And against the backdrop of this highly divisive time in our nation, let us pray that we can all redouble our commitment to being truly good to one another and multiplying our love of good deeds. With all my heart, I wish you a beautiful, happy, sweet New Year. And I, with Jewish leaders around the world, wish that everyone should be sealed in the book of life for a prosperous, healthy, and meaningful year. As we recite in the High Holiday Prayer Book, let the year and its curses conclude, and let the new year and its blessings begin.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. Fox News Radio on demand on the Fox News app. Download the app and just click listen. When you swipe left, you can listen to your favorite Fox News talk shows live. Swipe right for the latest Fox News Radio newscasts on demand. Fox News Radio on the Fox News app. Download it today.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.